All right, so, right, that goes here. So, my name is Melissa, and I'm a sculptor. I'm originally from Colorado. I grew up in the mountains there, and I now live and work in Cambridge. I originally studied English literature and physics, but then I've also done an MA in fine arts. So consequently, I bring a wide perspective to my work, and I'm interested in how art informs science and how science informs art. I use objects to think. I craft objects from a variety of media, from forged or cast metals, carved stone, wood, glass, ice, bubble wrap. I might use light and space, and I make structured compositions, which for me function as visual poetry. I'm interested in the link between object, symbolism, and metaphor. So for me, these steel shards are ambiguous objects that can call to mind writing, delicate tools, or might imply danger, threat, and weaponry. Often I make works and understand the meanings, motivations, or influences later, and this piece of work for me was kind of touching because I was working with constructing this form, looking at matrices actually, and I cast it into aluminum, and so something constructed, something more linear and organic, and it was in no way related to physics, but then when I looked at it, it reminded me of the work I'd done as an undergraduate student in Lawrence Berkeley Labs at the synchrotron there, and of particle, I'm just sort of not managing to, there we go, the particle physics collisions. And that was many years later. So just an echo of some of the images and interests that had come in a long time before. So some of the things that interested me here was this collision of particles and antiparticles, the creation of matter from energy, forces, trajectories, momentum, and methods of detection. And then I want to tell you about this project, which was I was looking at comparing a mathematical matrix and the function of a matrix, especially translating from one basis to another, but also I was looking in a wider sense, linking this into cultural narratives or this sort of sense of casting a matrix. Looking at poetic interpretations of this and linking to different knowledge bases, and so I tried to suggest the idea of the act of narration and creation of meaning, and I started off with this stacked matrix as a sort of a set of rules which I tried to kind of find my way to an aesthetic resolution, that sort of structuring of a set of rules and logically finding the form through that. So I want to go back. I relate very physically to the materials I work with, and I try and create works that people can also relate to physically as well as intellectually and artistically. And working with dancers allows me to explore this link a little bit more. So I created this piece with a video artist, Diana Scarborough, it's called Breaking Boundaries, and it was for the inauguration of the Passion for Knowledge series of public science lectures last year in San Sebastian in Spain. So we layered videos, sounds, sculptures, and dancers in a narrative structure, which began with an exploration of the body and the senses and extended to the world within and around us. So both Diana and I have backgrounds in science and technology as well as art, and so with this work, the choreography referred to scientific concepts from the lectures, such as neuroscience, cloaking technologies, astrophysics, particle physics, and the visuals included imagery such as microscopy of strands of amyloid beta cells, and the soundscape included atmospheric sounds captured at the Paleoantarctic base. So though we drew strongly on various scientific topics in this work, we didn't collaborate directly with scientists. But now I'll tell you a little bit about some work that I have done with artists and scientists, where artists and scientists are working more directly together. So for the past few years, I've facilitated artistic and scientific interactions at the Nanodoctoral Training Center at the University of Cambridge, with nano art, facilitated interactions between artists and scientists to engage in creative cross-disciplinary investigations at the nanoscale. And then drawing on silence introduced artistic methodologies to the scientists, their PhD candidates, in a series of creative workshops. So the nanoscale is a domain where structural properties and the everyday manifestations of materials are both in evidence. And the artists and the scientists shared conceptual approaches, physical locations, doing studio and lab visits, and explored questions of perception, scale, and self-assembly at the nanoscale. And a common theme which emerged in these collaborations was how I'm trying to scroll down here, I don't know if I'll be able to do that, how we use metaphoric thinking to imagine our way into these different realms that we're investigating. And as an example, I worked with two biochemists. So when we were talking together about a particular interaction, and I asked one how they imagined it, and he did the scribble over on the right, which simultaneously was sort of a gesture of thinking, but referred to mathematics, to writing, to the act of probing using a tool. And it reminded me of an instance of my own artistic problem solving, this drawing up here on the right, where I knew the form of, or the sense of what I wanted to create, but I didn't know what its eventual form in a 3D form it would take. So we worked together in the studio to try and make sense of these different ideas, and came together to this piece that we called Making Sense of Matter, which for us satisfied both artistic and scientific criteria of the ideas we were looking at. So to explore further, just maybe the sense of how we think and different ways we approach matter, I designed this series of drawing on science workshops. In each workshop, I was introducing a range of artistic approaches and methodologies and suggesting links with scientific research, and following this with a making session. So some of the ideas we explored were nonverbal thinking, gathering and categorizing data, making links and constructing understanding, extending of senses, and metaphoric meaning. And I also kind of designed these workshops to facilitate ease of engagement. So for example, by exploring new materials or playing games, and this allowed people to kind of avoid goal-oriented process or think, or consider what the outcome was, and just encourage nonverbal thinking. You know, we've been questioning a bit if there's a difference between scientific and creative approaches, or if it is just a matter of experience and specialization or vocabulary. And I suspect that, you know, a lot of what I'm hearing is that we're, you know, both artists and scientists use scientific and artistic modes of thinking, but we don't tend to present it so much in this way. And I think that a lot of times it's more of a matter of an institutional and educational separation, rather than separation in individual approaches. I have this image on the right as an example of a scientist who's made this model to try to understand the mathematics of a chemical process. And even though he was using this type of conceptualization, it wasn't something that he had shared with anybody else or his advisor. It's just his own thinking process. But I think that, you know, this sort of approach can be used. This sort of thinking can be used more consciously. So, you know, we've also looked at lots of different art practices and contemporary art. You know, this is the artist has tied markers to the branches of a tree and recorded the movement of the wind here. And though it has resemblances in a way to a scientific experiment and is collecting data, it's too unconstrained and loose, perhaps, to be able to glean scientific knowledge or make interpretations. But of course, many artists work this way, in just collecting data and noticing and recording patterns. And so my thinking around this is, you know, both artists and scientists employ intellect and engage with physical materials and use the imagination, but perhaps there are some broad differences in their approach. A scientist might favor a more logical, constructional approach, fitting knowledge into an existing framework of knowledge. And an artist might employ a more philosophical, intellectual approach, using a highly fluid and unbounded imagination with the aim of pushing the boundaries of expectation. Because artists don't need to force senses rapidly, they might more easily inhabit a world of uncertainty. Or maybe it's just that artists and science link their ideas to different knowledge bases. And perhaps just the aims of what we're trying to get out of our investigation is just a bit different, even though there are many points of connection. So I wanted to finish by just showing you a little bit of how I just draw from many different ideas just to make my own work. So just going to talk you through some of my own art. So this is an image of the boundary of the sea in northern Spain, where the pounding waves erode the alternating layers of soft and hard rock, which stretch into the hills out of the ocean. And I wanted to use this to illustrate how I'm kind of using metaphoric thinking to link knowledge and objects. So this coast speaks of time scales and histories, both geological and human, and of medical and physical boundaries and contrasts and processes and change. So in these layers here, you find fossils of ammonites from ancient times laid down in the layers of the rock here. I really wish at this point I could scroll down because that would help me. I'll just have to wing it here. And these coastlines, and we've talked about the cave paintings, these are places where you can find the human hand painted from ancient times in the caves on here. And people set out from this coastline to explore the New World before they knew really that the world was round. And the only person to return in Magellan's voyage was from this area of northern Spain, from Guetaria, just up the coast from here. While I was living in this area in San Sebastian, I met a scientist, Richard Prum, who was looking at fossils from China and the structural color of dinosaur feathers. For me, these kind of visual images linked, and it was similarly, you have this layering image of scales and times and histories. So my approach to using materials to think is I'm juxtaposing an emotional response against intellectually and culturally constructed narratives. For me, kind of sheds light on the role of invention and imagination in constructing a new understanding of matter. So as we are developing new materials and new understandings and exploring the world on increasing minute and vast scales, we can use poetic and visual imagination to catalyze our new thinking, to help us imagine our way into these new realms. So the current project that I'm working on is called Danger, and it's a 4-part series of installations which explores a precarious resilience I see in how humans relate to physical environments and to each other around the globe. And each part, stasis, shift, power, collapse, takes a different location as a starting point: Iceland, China, Istanbul, New Mexico, and it uses different materials and interactions. So I exhibited Stasis earlier this year, and it reflects on the balance between volcanic and glacial forces in Iceland. And I made sculptures made of steel, ice, and glass. Ice is elemental and ubiquitous, and it's for me a reflection of the state of the Earth. It freezes into crystals, flows in glaciers, and fractures into icebergs and flows, and it preserves and unlocks histories and times. Steel is a measure, for me, of the activity of man. It's a natural element, but it's forged in fire, man-made fabricated substance, which enables technology, industry, and warfare. In glass, both of these materials cohere, the liquid hot fusion of steel and the crystal of glass. So the second part, shift, is made with unstable arrangements of clay and stones, clay stones and wooden beams, and it's considering China, the traces of ancient civilizations imprinted on the land. So the clay here is contrasted with carved wooden blades, which refer to Stone Age ceremonial tools made of polished jade. So kind of looking at this idea of the meaning that we invest into objects and how objects and materials become metaphors for properties that we attribute to humans. The wood and clay forms are arranged in the changing form of a snaking river. And the hollow clay forms evoke both the stones from distant mountains weathered in rivers and containers made from the river clay. Each stone is marked as if cataloged from an archaeological dig. So these vessels, these containers that we make from the clay. The next parts that I'll be looking at is power. This turns to assemble and encounters in negotiations a strategic location between people and cultures, and takes the form of kind of a dance, a tango with steel shards, and collapses conceptually located in the desert of New Mexico. And I'll be working with sound and space and kind of more contemporary materials, and questioning the possibilities and the responsibilities inherent in scientific discovery. So I'm fascinated by these boundaries and the dynamic interactions at places where juxtaposing forces and materials meet. And these works for me evoke a relationship between man, objects, and environment. And if humans are vulnerable in their domain, they're also destructive. As we deepen, but also we can be constructive. So I think this idea of responsibility and as well as intellectual curiosity is quite important. So as we deepen our investigation into the materials, interactions, and processes of the universe, we kind of alter the role that storytelling, myth, and religion have played in our understanding of what humans are and what the world is. And we can't help but using metaphoric thinking, whether we're using maths as metaphor or we're using materials as metaphor, when we're trying to make sense of the world and of what we perceive. And so I think that these interactions between artists and scientists, where we're trying to work together and many, however that way we might be, whether it's kind of in a shared endeavor, whether we're kind of working on a collaborative process, it's a way of bringing our full intellect to the world around us using mind, body, and emotions. There.
Melissa, thanks a lot.
Thank you.